It's us idiots. We're back at it. Idiot Squared filming another ep. Joke. No, okay, so proper intro. Welcome back, Idiot Squared viewers. This week we are going to be debunking, possibly, Graham Hancock's theory, discussing his most recent podcast with Joe Rogan and another gentleman whose name I cannot remember, but Polska does. So, Polska, how are you this week, and what are we talking about?
I'm doing real good, bro. How are you?
Also very well, thank you.
So I know you didn't see the podcast. I've seen it over the course of the last couple of days, and whenever I had time to see parts of it. But basically, Rogan's been trying to get these two on there for a while, right? To do some sort of debate, I guess, because we all know Graham Hancock's story. Maybe most of us do. But he's become sort of famous or real famous for his belief that there's some sort of lost civilization. And his hypothesis is that this happened during the Youngest Dryas, when some sort of cataclysmic event occurred, which he's not 100% sure what occurred, but one of the hypotheses is that a comet exploded. And due to that, could have wiped out this advanced civilization. It could have had certain types of technologies that were lost, in which case they were then forced to sort of settle with hunters and gatherers, in which they began to sort of show these hunters and gatherers some of these technologies or some of the knowledge that they had. And they sort of passed down to these hunter-gatherers, and that's sort of the development of which the current technology or the current way of life is kind of now. Go for it.
So, are you saying that his hypothesis is that many thousands of years ago we were actually pretty advanced, like we were a lot more advanced, and then a comet hit, wiped out majority of that civilization, if not almost all of it, and society or humanity kind of rebooted from a different branch, so to speak. So like there was a very advanced branch and they were leading the way. They had advanced technologies and all this other stuff that they did cool stuff, potentially building pyramids and all that kind of thing. And then the comet or meteorite hit, wiped them out or most of them out. And then, the humanity sort of rebooted from some tribes lost in the jungle somewhere, or maybe a couple of these people survived and they were these mystical people that traveled around imparting the lost knowledge onto these other tribes.
Yeah, exactly. They were referred to as, I think it was the 6 or 7, I don't remember what the word is, but yeah, they became famous around the globe basically for passing down or sharing knowledge. I think one of the things that they shared had to do with agriculture in some sort of way. So Rogan had Graham on there to debate this guy named Flint Dibble, who is an archaeologist, who's a well-known archaeologist. Flint Dibble specifically studies crops and agriculture archaeology, and that's like his forte. But he seems to be an expert in other surrounding architectural. What's the word?
Agricultural?
No, archaeological fields. And it was a 4.5 hour podcast. I thought it was really good. To be honest, I thought that it seemed like Graham wasn't on his game, and Flint came very, very well prepared. And up until this point, I've been riding the Graham Hancock ship. I think you have been too, right?
I think what he proposes is very interesting. Absolutely,
it is very interesting.
But because it's stuff that we're talking about from the past, it's super hard to tell if any of it's true. But it does seem plausible, right? Like it does seem like they're definitely, especially with the pyramids and things like that. Like they don't ever talk about they don't really ever talk about the building of the pyramids. It's as if they kind of like sort of stumbled upon them And so, yeah, I don't know. There's lots of gaps, and what he proposes is something that could make sense of a lot of those gaps in a way. So yeah, I think it's interesting. Again, I don't know if it's true or not, but I just like, yeah, it's very interesting to have a different hypothesis for the history.
Welcome to Good Meals. I'm Reuben. I'm the founder and developer of Good Meals, and I'm here to introduce you to a smarter way to approach your diet. Forget the one-size-fits-all meal plans. Good Meals is about precision, personalization, and simplicity. Not just a meal planner, it's a tool that adapts to you. Start by telling us about yourself. Your goals are unique, so should be your meal plan. Good Meals utilizes advanced AI to tailor every meal to your specific nutritional needs. Here's where it gets interesting. Our extensive database isn't just a collection of recipes, it's a culinary exploration. Whether you have specific dietary preferences or just what's available in your fridge, Good Meals finds the perfect recipe for you. And it's not just about variety. We focus on the nutritional value, ensuring that every bite takes you closer to your health goals. Join Good Meals today at goodmeals.health. It's not just about eating better, it's about revolutionizing the way you think about food. Because at Good Meals, every meal is a step towards a healthier, happier you.
I'm trying to remember what the first episode of Graham Hancock's series was on Netflix, because they discussed that in length. And then they also discussed a second site in length. And then they finally discussed
Göbekli Tepe.
Yes, that's the one. And then they finally discussed the pyramids. And Flint had some really interesting evidence, but Flint's whole idea is that there's not enough evidence suggesting that there's a lost civilization. And he continued to present evidence for there being hunters and gatherers, right? So Graham is saying that only about 5%, so after the youngest Dryas cataclysmic event, the sea levels rise, right? So a lot of the land around the oceans or the seas is now underwater. And Graham is saying that there hasn't been enough investigations in those areas to rule out there being a lost civilization. And Flint Dibble is saying, well, all of the areas which we have investigated so far, we haven't found any evidence for a lost civilization. We've only found evidence of hunter-gatherers. So he continued to say that, there's only evidence showing hunter-gatherers. And Graham is saying, well, both could have existed simultaneously. I'm not saying that hunter-gatherers didn't exist. What I'm saying is they definitely did exist, but also that this advanced civilization could have existed as well. And that's what he brings up some of the examples, right? Temple?
Yeah, Göbekli Tepe.
Yeah.
So finding Göbekli Tepe, or uncovering that, sort of changed the timeline a little bit. Like, it sort of showed that, oh wow, for like 12,000+ years ago, there was already this tech. Like, people were already doing some version of farming and stuff like that around in Göbekli Tepe, which made people have to rethink the timeline, so to speak, on when humans or Homo sapiens developed different technologies or methods of agriculture, I think.
Yeah. We forgot to mention that. You're right. That the Youngest Dryas event happened around 13,000 or 12,500 years ago, right?
Yeah, it was 12. Did they say normally 12,800 or something like that? I don't know, but yeah, in between that range for sure.
Yeah. Well, Graham's Göbekli Temple. How do you say it again?
Göbekli Tepe.
Göbekli Tepe. Apparently, that dates back to anywhere between 20,000, 30,000 years ago, or 25,000 years ago.
Okay.
Yeah. So in regards to the agriculture stuff, Flint Dibble suggested that, well, there's currently no evidence suggesting that there was agriculture 13,000 years ago. And they were able to do that through, I believe it was carbon dating from pollen, I believe. And I can't remember what else. I think that was one of the things. And he was saying that there's no evidence showing that there was agriculture 13,000 years ago, right? And so each time Graham sort of highlighted something, Flint had a really good organized argument to sort of refute a lot of Graham's hypotheses. So it was really interesting, and it got really interesting when they finally got into the pyramids and the Sphinx, because Graham Hancock is now not suggesting that the pyramids are 13,000 years old, but the Sphinx definitely is what he's saying. And one of the things he points to is the water,
the erosion.
The erosion, yeah, from the heavy rainfall, right? And Flint is saying that could have happened a lot more recent than Graham is suggesting, that there's not enough evidence to suggest that erosion occurred, or that erosion began to occur, the time frame which Graham is pointing to. And so he was sort of debunking that, and he also debunked, well, I mean, it's not clear, but it seems as though many of those stones that were moved weren't actually taken from that far away. The quarry for the stones that were used to build the Sphinx were actually quite close by. And he suggests that humans could have moved those blocks. And a lot of the cutting of rocks or drilling into rocks could have been done with the tools that they did have at disposal during that time, along with sand. So it was a very interesting talk because up until this point, I really enjoyed Graham's theory, right? It just seems like a really cool story. But then after listening to Flint, I'm doubting it a little bit. I'm kind of thinking like, wow, like this is maybe just because Flint was just able to give a much more effective presentation, and maybe because Graham didn't seem like he was on his game. But each time Graham suggested something, Flint had a perfectly reasonable, rational explanation. The only thing is that I remember I saw something about these drill marks that they showed in certain stones, or megaliths, stones or rocks or whatever.
Yeah, big ass stones.
Yeah, big ass stones. And I guess people, I don't know who, or engineers, or I can't remember, scientists of some sort, were suggesting that in order to achieve that type of drill hole or whatever into the rock, you would have to be moving at an incredible speed, and it wouldn't have been able to be successfully done with any of the tools which they had during those times, right? But that wasn't really discussed at length, that part. Flint just said, no, they could have done that. They could have, with the tools that they had, they could have successfully drilled those holes and cut those rocks. So that's like the only thing that's doubting me about Flint's argument, is that one piece. Because the rest, when it comes to agriculture, there's currently no evidence of humans taking part in like agriculture 13,000 years ago, and he was able to show that. There's no real evidence of tools or machines or things that were being used by an advanced civilization 13,000 years ago. The only things that they could find are hunter-gatherers, is evidence of hunter-gatherers. So I'm doubting it now. But again, the way that some of these megaliths are connected, where it's so perfectly put in place, and how they're cut and how they're drilled into, and then also how the pyramids are pointed to perfect north, and how the Sphinx is positioned in a way where during summer solstice, I believe it was, when the sun is at its, or was it equinox? I can't remember which one it was, but you'll see the sun rise right above the Sphinx's head. So again, Graham suggests that this advanced civilization has some sort of knowledge about stars and planets and space and some sort of capacity, which how were they able to achieve that? Hunter-gatherers would not have been able to have that level of sophistication or knowledge. So again, there's that piece that's sort of missing too, because the only thing Flint Dibble was able to say about that is that humans are amazing, and they could have, they could have looked at the stars and positioned the Sphinx and positioned the pyramids accordingly. And when Graham says, okay, what about the numbers? When you divide the base of the pyramids by this number, it gives you, the circumference of the Earth, or I'm not explaining that part very well, or none of it at all, really. But Flint suggested that, well, that's, if you look for numbers in things, you can find what you're looking for. Like if you just do enough math, you can sort of come to many conclusions about many different things. So it's likely that that's what we've currently done, is we've just looked too much and finally have stumbled upon some sort of mathematical answer that's convenient, but it's not evidence suggesting that there was some sort of advanced civilization.
Flint sounds like a killjoy, not gonna lie, guy. He sounds like a killjoy.
Dude, he is a killjoy, but he was well prepared.
Yeah, that's mad interesting. When he said there's no evidence for advanced civilizations, I don't know, like, is that based off like all archaeological findings from across the world at all possible locations? Because I don't think we've explored everything yet. So I think that's a tough statement to make. But yeah, definitely sounds like he's a bit of a killjoy. It's good though. It's good to be challenged on stuff. It's good to have that pushback, so that does create that little bit of seed of doubt, because that opens your mind up to different possibilities, right? Like, Graham Hancock is most likely not 100% correct on all of his things, but through that criticism and critique of his work, new theories or new explanations will emerge, and they're likely going to be better. So that's a beautiful part of the discovery of knowledge, is that criticism and critique. But yeah, like you said, maybe Graham wasn't as well prepared. So hopefully now that he's had this, there will be an impetus for him to better prepare his arguments and hopefully help him to present his thesis or hypothesis better, and to provide more evidence in the future. You reckon that's what he's going to do? Or did he look defeated?
I couldn't tell if he looked defeated. He was a little bit angry at parts, because he's been called a racist and a white supremacist for things that he suggested during his Netflix series. And it was actually Flint that wrote an article suggesting that Graham was sourcing articles that basically were white supremacist type articles or racist type articles. And the way Flint painted this picture was, some of the articles had to do with, I believe it was some of the stone carvings or carvings that found in Mexico. I believe it was in Mexico. There's 3 different types, and one of them, Graham suggested that it could have been Polynesian or African descent. I think I'm mixing something up, actually. That was one of the things. But okay, I'm gonna try and talk out of my ass a little bit less here. I believe, okay, I'm gonna skim over this, but I can't remember exactly how it was, but apparently Graham sourced articles that were suggested to be supporting this idea that what was it? Don't remember exactly how it was laid out, but the article suggested that, I believe it was that it wasn't giving the indigenous people the recognition that they deserved for some of these cultural artifacts. And it was pointing to, Europeans or something, maybe Europeans having some sort of influence on some of these cultures, like Spaniards, and maybe Spanish people sort of changing the history or rewriting history in a way. So this sort of colonization, we hear that word a lot now these days. Flint attempted to sort of point to that, right? That Europeans are colonizers, and because Graham Hancock used some of the articles from
that makes Graham racist.
So that makes Graham racist and a white supremacist, right?
Yeah.
And so Graham was a little bit upset about that. And a lot of the podcast was actually him arguing with Flint about trying to make him, being painted as a racist in the world. So Graham was also a little bit angry as well. Like you could tell.
He could have thrown him off. Who's Flint? Where's he from?
He's American archaeologist. I don't remember where he's from. But yeah, I
What's
think
his name?
I think Flint Dibble.
Dibble would have been better if it was Dabble.
It's funny because he looks like I think maybe he might think he's like an Indiana Jones type. He was wearing an Indiana Jones hat.
Yeah,
but he very well presented. He had a very good presentation, and I give him props for going on, because that's like Rogan's boy. Graham Hancock is like one of the first real guests Rogan had on the podcast, and he's been on there a bunch of times. So Dibble is going into this knowing that he's probably going to be called out for writing the article about Graham Hancock being a white supremacist, and he's going on the show with, their boys, like Graham and Rogan are kind of boys. So I give him mad props for that. And he handled himself really well. I actually thought Graham was being a little bit rude at times, to be completely honest.
Okay.
Yeah,
well, that's big coming from a Hancock supporter that you are.
Yeah. And like I said, he was a
writer
little bit
of
angry.
the Hancock.
That's right. But granted, though, I understand why he was angry, but I would say that Graham was a little bit rude at times, and I have to give props to Flint for actually going on there and taking the heat and keeping his composure.
Guy, I didn't know Flint was in Scary Movie 2.
That could be his dad, right there.
Oh, that's hilarious. Okay,
his
so
dad was
apparently
also an archaeologist.
there is a refutation of Flint Dibble in defense of Graham Hancock. So I'm just going to click on this real quick. This is from December 2022.
Yeah, they've been going at each other for a while. Like, I think Flynn might be at the head of the Graham Hancock takedown, or at least Flint's community of people trying to take Graham Hancock down, trying to get Netflix to recategorize the show into fantasy or something, take it off the science category or whatnot. Put it somewhere else.
But this is something that always happens when you have like a mainstream version of things, or a mainstream narrative or a consensus narrative, and then you have somebody else who proposes a different thing. And part of that is, it's just like, it's computationally expensive to have to update your model, right? It's very convenient just to keep the one that you're used to. But as we know, with all explanations, they're all fallible, and none of them are the complete version. They're just maps, right? The map is not the territory. So the explanation is never complete, right? It's just more or less useful than other explanations. But again, that's why we like listening to these different versions, because they could illuminate different things and provide us with a better explanation, so to speak. So I'm going to send you this, and you can link this one in the show notes. I'm sure that there is an updated version based on this most recent pod. But yeah, if people are interested, get into it. Go and have a look. If you haven't heard about what Hancock has proposed, it's actually incredibly interesting.
Very interesting.
I don't know much about Flint. He looks like a crazy dude, though. He looks like the kind of guy that would get super into stuff and spend a lot of time and effort diving down rabbit holes. So maybe he's an interesting fellow to get to know as well. Okay, so I'm just going to throw something out. I have like almost no evidence to support this whatsoever. So everything I say, take it with a grain of salt. But I reckon that Antarctica is where we're going to find a massive civilization. Like,
Yeah.
there's a lot of weird shit that ends up happening in Antarctica. Like, there's a bunch of bases down there. There's a bunch of experiments that are continuously being done down in Antarctica. You've got to get permission to fly over it at certain times. There's a whole bunch of rumors about like vibrational. Oh, is it vibrational? Some sort of high energy. Yeah. Vibrational weapon systems that they're apparently trialing down there.
High energy weapon system, right?
Yeah. There's a bunch of stuff. Anyway, Antarctica is like, it's like on the bottom. I could imagine that like way, way, way back in the day when the flood started happening, they would think that like the people at the bottom of the earth would get flooded. Like, like the bottom of the earth kind of vibe. So I don't know. I just tend to think that there could be something down there that if that ice melts at some stage, we might uncover it. You could imagine that there could have been a thriving civilization down there, and then with whatever happened with comets or a shift in the climate and that getting frozen over, that would change. So yeah, interesting. But there's a bunch of like pyramid looking things that are apparently down there. There's a huge landmass underneath all that ice that could have housed an advanced civilization, but only time will tell, won't it? Like, that's the interesting thing is it's going to take a lot of time and effort to uncover these things.
Yeah, I'll just finish by saying that was one of Graham Hancock's main points, is that there hasn't been enough searching. No, that's not. Yeah, enough investigation done to rule out that an advanced civilization was not like living.
Yeah, I agree with that. And it's until we've, until we've explored every inch of the planet, so to speak, there won't have been enough. You know what I mean?
Exactly.
And there's a huge amount of the planet that is unexplored, including the oceans and the land as well. Like, there still would be places on the planet that no human has ever been.
You gotta love, like, I see this a lot on podcasts, dude, is when you have opposing ideas and there's a debate, it never gets to the point where the other person can sort of just admit or maybe agree or there can be some sort of compromise reached. It just, that never seems to happen on any podcasts ever, because the fact that Graham is suggesting that, listen, we haven't done enough investigating to rule out, like, that's legit. How can you not agree with that? We haven't investigated 100% of the world, so we can't say for sure that there's never been an advanced civilization. But Flint couldn't get himself to even agree with that on any level. He's saying, no, there's no evidence of it. We can't say that there is. And Graham's like, yeah, I'm not saying that there is, but we can't say that there wasn't. Like, but they never could get to an agreement. It's just frustrating. Like, why? What? Even though you can still keep your argument, you can still debate, you can still do your thing, but come on, dude. Like, you're a scientist. You can't rule out the fact that there might have been.
That's right.
An advanced civilization. You just can't do that. You can't say there 100% wasn't. So anyway, it was
The reason why that's very rare is because, again, it's super computationally and energy intensive to update your priors. It's seriously hard to sort of destroy your world model, to rebuild it with a new version, if that makes sense. Like, to update your priors is costly, in a sense, especially if you've built like your entire life's work off it, right? Like, if what pays him his bills is him believing that isn't true, then it's very hard for him to say that it could be. There's what's that good saying? It's very hard to get someone to believe the truth if their paycheck depends on not believing it.
Yeah, dude, that's crazy, right? So this is fascinating, because I heard something recently and I thought it was a really good point, where if you're working for a news media company, for example, CNN, and we know that a lot of drug companies pay for advertisements on that platform. Like, I think it was as high as 80%, right? So you're working for CNN, okay? No one is actually telling you, hey, listen, this is how we think. This is our culture. These are the things that we're going to be pushing. It's likely that no one's telling you what to say and how to act, but you just fall in line because you are aware who's paying the bills, who's paying your wage. So you just naturally fall into this, the CNN narrative or the CNN culture, and you begin to adapt all of the culturist, things that occur at CNN, and you become like that guy.
Yeah.
Without anyone having to tell you to do that.
That's right. You don't bite the hand that feeds you, in a sense. And like we mentioned many times, like businesses, companies, governments, etc., end up, one way to think of them is like meta-organisms, and they have an immune system, right? So if that meta-organism is fed monetarily, right, it survives off monetary energy or just money, right? If it's fed by certain people, like if they're the main source of energy, well, then if some of the individual parts of this meta-organism start going against that, start pissing that thing off, or start biting that hand, so to speak, well, the immune system kicks in and kind of makes sure, like, hey, you either get in line or get out. A great example of this is Tucker Carlson. He started to go against, and bang, man, the system had an immune response against him. They essentially ejected him from that system. Luckily, there are other alternatives, and he has now found himself a new home on X and his own website and all the rest of it, and he's still doing great work. And he himself, this is an interesting thing too, is so because he's now been ejected from that system, or ejected from that system, he's out of it. He can now own the things that he fucked up previously. So like he's openly acknowledged this. I think it was on a podcast where he said I pushed agendas because I was essentially brainwashed. I was in that mindset because of the environment I was in, right? Like the funding, everyone around him was of similar beliefs. So he would push these narratives. And when he looks back on it, he's like, I hate myself for doing that. That was the wrong thing to do. I pushed the wrong narrative. I pushed the wrong message. And part of it is because of, where the funding comes from, so to speak.
Yeah. He was on the Reuben podcast this week too, eh?
That's another interesting thing we should possibly dive into. But to wrap this up, so interesting thing, having that challenge. I do like the criticism and critique. I do think it will evolve or put selective pressure to come up with better explanations. So I hope something emerges from this. And the last thing about the people not necessarily updating their priors, it does happen. It's very rare. And when you do see it, it's a pretty magical thing. And it's what allows us to progress and develop new knowledge and come up with new explanations. So yeah, it's an incredibly important thing. Anything else to wrap on this one?
No, that's good, guy. That's good.
All right. Thanks for listening. Fuck you, bye. No, that was a joke. Don't include that bit. Thanks, Polska. Thanks for listening. Go and check out the Graham Hancock, Flint Dibble podcast, and peace.
All right, peace.